where to begin? So, the way I started off my campaign, I wanted to take our characters from their ordinary world and transport them into somewhere extraordinary, while also making for a nice long tutorial of all of the different rules and the like of D&D. So I set it up as your home kingdom is suffering a great famine, and you all are aware of this. And so you decide to flee across the great southern desert to the large empire to the south. And so the idea was that over this desert, there would be nice little kind of modular encounters, dungeons, a single city in the center of it, and that this would be a good place to slowly introduce all of the ideas about playing D&D and just, the possibilities as well as the hard rules. Now, second encounter, I had a table, and I made them roll a d20, because there were 20 numbers on the table for what kind of encounter they could get. And they rolled a 2. And 2 was a bad encounter. 2 was 2 thugs. Now, for those who don't know, a thug, when you do the math and crunch the numbers behind the scenes, a thug should be a hard encounter. But thugs are one of the most unbalanced NPCs of the early level enemies. Thugs are meaty and they are dangerous, and it literally came down to the point where every single party member was knocked unconscious, and there was a single thug remaining. And it looked like there was going to be a full party wipe, as it's called, when everyone dies. But then, on his, with 2 fails on the death saving throws, player Marcus burns inspiration to re-roll a die, because he rolled a fail, which would have meant his character permanently dies. He re-rolls it, and he gets a nat 20, a 20 on the die. So what happens is that when you get a 20 on the die, at least in my campaign, you come back to consciousness with a single hit point. And so he comes back, he slays the thug, finishes the fight, and then stabilizes the rest of the party, and no one dies. And if you ever hear people say that I'm a hard DM, I really think that encounter might be part of the reason. It was a long way back, but wow, people still remember it. So, for the record, there are other reasons that I'm known as a hard DM. One of the things was, as I said, our players arrive at the single city at the center of this desert, called the Free City of Is. And the Free City of Is is an oasis village. And this oasis is quite well kept. It has a large series of aqueducts that transport water all throughout the city, and a whole bunch of the monodrones and other types of mechanical drones by the deity Mechanus that roam the city in order to perform menial tasks, keeping the waterways all flowing. And within the city, there was an incredibly lavish hotel called Yves Grotto. And 2 of the players decided, hey, we want to stay the night in Yves Grotto. Yves Grotto cost well over 20 gold for a single night. They were poor, and even if they weren't poor, they were not willing to pay that. So they decide, okay, we got a plan. We're going to say that we spoke with the mayor, and that the mayor said that we could have a room. Okay, reasonable enough plan. Now, they just have a problem. They know this is a city, so it probably has a mayor, right? But they don't know who the mayor is. And they don't seem intent on actually visiting the mayor. So they go up to a random group of kids on the street, and they ask, who's the mayor here? And so the kids, being kids and dickbags, decide to tell them, fake names. But they're kids, so they're giggling about it the entire time. And it's just like, the party is not being fooled, but they're annoyed that they're not getting their information. So one of the players, a monk named Alvin, decides to punch the kid in the face. And so, yeah, that initiated a combat. And so the kids tried to run, but he grabs one of the kids and then also beats him as well. And the rest of the half of the party had split up at this point in the city, so there was only the lawful good paladin present. And yeah, the lawful good paladin decided to not get involved, and I forget if he tried to run away, but eventually what happened is that one of the kids did manage to run away from this physically assaulting monk in the middle of town and get a guard. And so the guard comes and tells him to surrender, but when you've punched 2 kids in the face, you're pretty much got to commit at that point. So the monk tries to attack the 2 guards now, and I think the paladin sided against the player here, the monk deciding to just harm children for what seems to be a pretty unjustifiable reason. And so what happens is he gets knocked unconscious, and our monk is now detained. And he gets brought back to the local jail for questioning and gets thrown in jail. And our paladin comes along, being a good paladin. He's all like, yeah, I want to apologize, but like, you know, can you let him out? And the guards are like, no, we're not letting him out. And so yeah, he's paladin's sad about that. But in the meantime, the other 2 characters who had split off, they finally managed to get the name of the mayor. Now, unfortunately, that's all they were asking for. If they had asked literally anything more, they would know that Yves, the man behind Yves' Grotto, is the mayor's brother. And so when they go to Yves' Grotto and say that we have spoken to the mayor, and the mayor says, we can have a place, essentially Yves, who gets brought down into this conversation, essentially goes up to them and asks, who on earth does my sister think she is, saying that people can just stay in my hotel and that they do not have to pay? And the party didn't really have a response.
Oof.
So that was kind of awkward, but Yves is a shrewd enough man. What he decides to do, since he can certainly smell some bullshit, especially since he rolled a nat 20 on his insight. So what Yves does, he says, okay, fine, have the diplomat suite, largest suite. And so they go up to their suite, and they, they look around. It's very lavish, extremely lavish. Tons of amenities, incredibly large, personal balcony overlooking the grotto itself. And as they look over the grotto, they see a very large sum of guards outside. And they're looking up. Not doing anything, they're just looking up. And so the 2 party members look to each other, and they're all like, we should get out of here, man, this is bad. But Yves comes up, and he says that since you had come here, spoken to the mayor, he wanted to host a nice dinner with the mayor and the 2 party members and a whole bunch of other important people in the free city of Is, that you should all come together and, have a nice meal. And so the party naturally flipped a lid because they've never met the mayor, who they claim is giving them a free room. So they decide, okay, we'll meet you, Yves, but first we want to go for a walk. And he's like, oh, it's getting a bit late. But yeah, you guys can go for a walk, don't worry. I have a personal guard attachment to go and help escort you, make sure nothing happens. And they try, but they do not manage to get Yves to relent on this, so they walk around town for a bit with a bunch of guards surrounding them, and walk back to the grotto since they could not plan an escape route. And so, yeah, palms are pretty sweaty at this point, since it seems like they really do need to get out of this situation. But here's the funny bit. In the meantime, as all this is happening, our paladin decides that, hey, I'm not going to go along with this harebrained scheme to try and stay in the fancy hotel. And so he goes to the guards who are holding his friend, the monk, and he says, hey, can I just sleep in the jail cell? Like, I need a place to stay and I don't have one. And the guards are all like, okay, just give us your weapons and armor. And so yeah, he relinquishes all of his weapons and armor and he goes to the prison cell voluntarily, pat him down, and he just goes to sleep with his monk friend who assaulted children.
The paladin?
Yep, the paladin.
Just straight up.
Paladin, he's just like, no, I need a
What?
place to sleep, so I'll just sleep in prison. What's great is that later on in the night, the monk in question breaks out of prison. He manages to get the key from one of the guards, and he manages to sneak and run out of the central jail. So now the only person in jail is the lawful good paladin who has done literally nothing and willingly relinquished his freedom for the night, just to have a bed to sleep on. Meanwhile, at the Yves Grotto, the other two remaining party members return, and without any good excuse or any good way of convincing Yves to not show up to the dinner, they show up to the dinner as the guests of honor. And the Prince Mare, she looks upon them with great smugness, and I cannot fully recount just how brutal it was. You could sense the absolute fear and frustration in them as they had to, as it was essentially revealed slowly that everybody was in on the fact that these two hucksters essentially have tried to fake their way into the hotel. And everybody, all of the highest ranking people in IS are now laughing at them, as they are now essentially like court jesters before them. And so it's all a bunch of good fun. Until a guard shows up. Now, one thing I forgot to mention was that before our paladin went to go stay the night in the jail, the guards asked him a few questions since he was a friend of the child assaulting monk. Now, he told the guards that he was roaming around with his party with a divine being, and that they stumbled upon a group of cultists, and them and the divine being gave him a good smackdown, and killed them all because they were doing bad demon things. And so he mentions this before voluntarily getting in jail. Well, that head guard runs over to the Duchess, or sorry, not the Duchess, the Prince Mare, as she is called, and essentially tells them that, time to cut the laughs, we got a problem. So what happens is that a bunch of guards arrest our two lying party members who tried to stay in the fanciest place in town, and they get brought to jail. And what happens is that everybody comes down, including the mayor and Yves, and essentially they reveal that, they were connected with the cult, and that they're not happy that this random group of adventurers has just destroyed this cult that they worked so hard to build in order to summon these demons, and that now it's gone. And so that was the situation at the end of one of our sessions. We had 3 of the 4 party members in prison, recognizing that the cult they had smashed was actually being run by the city, and that the mayor is not happy with them. And the random monk that assaulted children is the only person free. So, in terms of pickles, it was a big one. I bet you're wondering how they got out of this can of worms. Essentially, they were in a real hard situation. Now, let me remind you, this is a matter of like a few months into playing D&D. You could argue I hit them a little hard in terms of this situation. A lot of things just by serendipity happen to be stacked against them. The fact that, the head of the hotel was a brother of the mayor, the fact that the mayor was connected to the cult they destroyed, the fact that, everything didn't seem to go their way in the rolls. So I threw them a bit of a bone. I was like, okay, there is a very powerful magical man. They don't even, he's reoccurred, but they don't fully understand who he is yet. And he essentially pulls aside one of the party members in the night and says, listen, I'm going to put a brand on you. Demonic, evil brand. on your back. And if you accept this brand, I will, next morning, give you and your compatriots all of their equipment, and you can leave. And it was a deal kind of too good to refuse, so said party member took the deal, was imposed with the demon brand, and you would think that things would be kind of straightforward there, but no, he wakes up the next morning, and the rest of the party, choosing not to ask what on earth happened with him, and him choosing not to share the conversation he had, the other two imprisoned party members say, okay, time to break out. And so they begin their prison break. They pull like a stone out of the ground. They manage to use a stolen key that the monk had left behind to open the cell gates. And they try and run out. And I don't remember exactly, but it was some of the worst rolls I've ever seen in combat. Truly, they were being decimated by just 2 guards on a staircase. It was really pitiful.
Oof.
And it's at this point, as they initiate combat and begin losing, that our player says, hey guys, they're actually going to let us out. To which then the rest of the party, like a kid who's been spotted pulling a cookie from the cookie jar, decide to run back into their cell, lock the door, and then essentially pretend like they weren't just attempting to break out of prison. At this point, also, the monk decides to join them in the prison break. So now all of the party has willfully locked themselves in jail. And so the guards all come down, and the head guard, and they're all like, what on earth is happening here? And luckily for the party, they managed to do no damage to any of the guards. So the guards are just more so, you know, they thought they had like a big issue here, but nobody's been hurt except them. They're the ones who are bloodied. To which then the party member brings up that he had made the deal with this very sketchy demon-associated man, and that they should be let out. And then they do. They do get let out of prison. But, and this is the key thing here, you'd think they all get let out of prison, they all get their equipment back. You'd think that one of the party members would be like, whoa man, how did you get this deal? And that, you know, our player, who is branded with this demonic seal on his back, would have some bullshitting to do. No, nobody decides to ask at all. They're just like, yo, sweet, we're out. So yeah, that, the story doesn't fully end there. There's a little more to it. Essentially, they go about their day, they do some role play, they go meet, you know, the town wizard, go to a bar, usual party stuff. And that player who made the deal with the demon-associated fellow decides to just steal. From one of the shopkeepers. Now, guard presence is already pretty, you know, sizable in this city in the desert. And so, yeah, he gets back in trouble with the guards and decides that it is time to make a grand escape and run out of the city. And so that's what they do. All of the party gets into a gigantic chase where guards and cultists are all chasing them out of the city. They get their camels, they get running, and in the process, the monk gets left behind since in the combat with some of the cultists, he falls unconscious. Due to friendly fire.
Oh, dear God.
Yes, the spell Burning Hands, which comes out as a cone, one of the players literally forgot it comes out as a cone. And he was adamant that nobody had told him that it was a cone. But I actually, because I make sure that my notes are up to date, I was randomly scrolling through the archive of all of the rolls in Roll20, and at some point, literally before the combat, one of the players asked him, is Burning Hands a cone? And he replies yes. Before the combat. So obviously, he just had a massive brain fart where he completely forgot that Burning Hands was a cone. But either way, our monk did not leave Is. He was left behind, unconscious, and burned. But the other 3 of them, the paladin and the true people trying to lie their way into Ys Grotto, they managed to run for their lives away from the free city of Is. And that was the very first city that the party ever encountered. And that, I feel, is the real reason that I am known as a horribly mean and difficult GM. Because Is, to this day, remains a very sensitive point for all of them. They all remember Is, and they don't remember it fondly.